A very good afternoon to you from the studios of Atlantic Television Network in Port Harcourt. This is ATN International News for today. To begin, let's take a look at the biggest stories making the headlines. Sudan RSF attacks East Gezira villages. 10 bodies recovered in fuel tanker explosion. UK's Labour Party accused of election interference. Capitol riots defendants face trespassing charges. Government condemns killing of broadcast journalists. India retains investment curbs on border nations. Israeli strike kills 4 children in Beirut. These and many more stories to come your way in a moment. Do stay with us. In details, we delve into Africa. Paramilitary rallies have attacked villages in the east of Sudan's El Gezira state, killing at least 25 people following the defection of high-ranking RSF officer Abu Agla Kikal, who is from the area, activists said. As soldiers from other RSF divisions ransacked the farming state beginning in December. Kikal's local forces had held incursions into East Gezira at bay, sparing civilians the worst of the violence while imposing control on the area. But following his defection on Sunday, large numbers of RSF soldiers streamed into the region in what activists described as revenge, reporting displacement, looting and killings. Now they have their chance to do what they want, said one activist who asked to remain anonymous to protect family in the area. The Rufa Resistance Committee, a pro-democracy group, said on Tuesday that at least 25 people in Rufa, the 11 other villages and towns since on Sunday. Most Rufa residents had their supports of it said. An eyewitness from the town of Hilalia said they had seen RSF soldiers looting markets and medical clinics, though a network blackout meant few details were available. The RSF said on Tuesday that it had driven the army out of the town of Tambol, where the two sides had clashed as the army continues a campaign to regain territory from the RSF. The RSF shared a video on Tuesday purportedly showing that the army's commander in Tambul had been killed, along with 370 other soldiers. The Rufa committee said the army had withdrawn from the town, while the army did not immediately release a statement on the clashes. The Resistance Committee in the state capital, Wat Madani, said on Monday that 31 people had been killed in an army airstrike during at the night before. 10 bodies were recovered from the scene of a fuel tanker explosion in Uganda's capital today. A report by newsman Witness said police say the tanker had overturned around 3 p.m. local time and that several people may have lost their lives while others have been injured. The incident occurred in the suburb of Kigugwa on the city's northern outskirts on the road connecting Kampala and the northern city of Gulu, police said. Videos posted on social media platform X showed the fuel tanker lying on its side as some residents rushed towards it with jerrycans to siphon off fuel. Other videos showed a large fireball burning the tanker and nearby houses while smoke rose into the air. At least 8 people, including children, were killed and 20 injured in a drone strike at a fair in Mali's northern Timbuktu region, Tuareg rebels said on Tuesday. The rebel coalition, known as the Permanent Strategic Framework for the Defense of the People of Azawad, CSP-DPA, said in a statement on Monday that a Turkish drone had carried out several strikes on a local market and civilian dwellings. The CSP-DPA blamed Mali's army and its allies for their attack. Mali's armed forces did not immediately respond to a request for comment on the incident. The Tuareg are an ethnic group that inhabits the Sahara region, including parts of northern Mali, and it's fighting for an independent homeland. The separatist group launched an insurgency against Mali's junta government in 2012, but the rebellion was later hijacked by Islamist groups. They signed a peace agreement with Bamako in 2015, but CSP-DPA pulled out of the talks at the end of 2022. In late July, the rebels attacked a convoy of Malian soldiers and mercenaries of Russia's Wagner Group in the far north of the Sahel country, claiming to have killed 84 Russians and 47 Malian soldiers. South Africa sees Russia as a valued ally, President Cyril Ramaphosa said at a bilateral meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin on Tuesday on the eve of the BRICS summit of emerging economies that will take place in the Russian city of Kazan. We continue to see Russia as a valued ally, as a valued friend who supported us right from the beginning, from the days of our struggle against apartheid, Ramaphosa said, according to a clip of the two leaders' meeting shared on social media by South Africa's government news agency. We are going to have important discussions here in Kazan within the BRICS family, the South African president added. Donald Trump's campaign has accused British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's Labour Party of blatant foreign interference in the U.S. presidential election after its volunteers traveled to the United States to help campaign for Kamala Harris. The campaign has filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission in Washington, calling for an immediate investigation into what it called apparent illegal foreign national contributions made by the Labour Party of the United Kingdom and accepted by Harris for president. The complaint cited media reports and a now deleted LinkedIn post from Sophia Patel, head of operations at Britain's Labour Party, who wrote that nearly 100 current and former Labour Party staff would be traveling to the US in the coming weeks to help elect Harris, the Democratic vice president. Those searching for foreign interference in our elections need to look no further than the LinkedIn post said. The letter of complaint also added, the interference is occurring in plain sight. The center-left Labour Party, which sees the U.S. Democrats as its sister party, swept to power in July. Starmer has since sought to build ties with Trump, meeting him at his Trump Tower during a visit to New York in September. Starmer, traveling on a flight to Samoa, told reporters that he did not expect the complaint to strain relations with Trump if he wins the election on November 5th, adding that Labour volunteers had gone to pretty much every U.S. election. They're doing it in their spare time. They're doing it as volunteers. They're saying, I think, they're staying, I think, with other volunteers over there, he said. That's what they've done in previous elections. That's what they are doing in this election, and that's really straightforward. U.S. President Joe Biden said on Tuesday that Republican Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and should be locked up politically as he exhorted Democrats at a New Hampshire campaign office to win the November 5th election. We got to lock him up, Biden said to applause at a Democratic campaign office in Concord, New Hampshire. Politically lock him up, lock him out. That's what we have to do, he said. Trump, the Republican candidate and former president, wants to disregard the safeguards of the U.S. Constitution, Biden said. A democracy is at stake if Trump beats Democratic candidate Kamala Harris, he said. Trump, when he ran for president in 2016, repeatedly presided over rallies in which crowds chanted "Lock her up," referring to them Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton. He did not discourage them from that chant. This year, during rallies for Harris, her crowds sometimes chant "Lock him up," referring to Trump, who has been convicted of 34 felony counts related to covering up hush money paid to a porn star. He also faces charges of illegally trying to overturn his 2020 election loss. But Harris shuts down the chants, saying the Justice Department will handle that issue while she seeks to beat the former president at the ballot. U.S. Appeals Court on Tuesday upheld the use of a criminal trespassing charge against nearly all of the 1,500 defendants accused of taking part in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol, rejecting an attempt to further restrict the charges available to prosecutors. In a 2-to-1 ruling, a panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit rejected an appeal by the defendant, Corey Griffin, to toss out his conviction on a misdemeanor charge that bars unauthorized people from entering restricted areas protected by the U.S. Secret Service. Griffin argued that federal prosecutors must prove that he knew that then Vice President Mike Pence was at the Capitol on the day of the riot, creating the need for Secret Service protection. Pence presided over the congressional certification of the 2020 election results at the Capitol that day. The court, in upholding Griffin's conviction, found that prosecutors only had to prove the defendant knowingly entered a restricted area. A ruling against the government could have complicated scores of January 6 prosecutions. As of August, about 95% of all Capitol riots defendants faced that trespassing charge, according to U.S. Justice Department's figures. Several defendants have brought legal challenges over its use in January 6 cases. The U.S. Supreme Court in June heightened the legal standard for prosecutors pursuing a different felony obstruction charge against those accused of taking part in the riot, forcing prosecutors to reassess more than 250 cases. A spokesperson for the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington declined to comment on Tuesday's ruling. A lawyer for Griffin did not immediately respond to a request for comment as well. Griffin, a former New Mexico County Commissioner and founder of the group Cowboys for Trump that supported former President Donald Trump in the 2020 election, entered the Capitol grounds during the riot and climbed on a stage belt for the presidential inauguration later that month. A judge found him guilty of 2 misdemeanor offenses and sentenced him to 14 days in jail in 2022. Texas's Republican Attorney General Ken Paxton sued Democratic U.S. President Joe Biden's administration on Tuesday, saying the federal government was not providing the help it needed in assessing the citizenship status of some of its registered voters. The lawsuit, filed in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Texas, accuses the Biden administration and specifically the Department of Homeland Security of refusing to help it determine the citizenship status of 450,000 of the 17.9 million registered voters in the state. It is already illegal for non-citizens to vote in U.S. federal elections, and state and private reviews have turned up very few instances of them doing so. Still, Republican presidential candidates Donald Trump and his allies have argued that large numbers of non-citizens could vote in the November 5th election when he faces Democrat Kamala Harris. The Department of Homeland Security did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Trump has falsely claimed that his 2020 loss to Biden resulted from widespread voter fraud. Paxton's office said he sent a letter earlier this month asking the U.S. government to verify the citizenship status of people who may be unlawfully registered to vote in Texas by October 19th. His office said he proceeded with the lawsuit when his request was not answered. His office said there were nearly 500,000 voters whose citizenship status has not been verified, but acknowledged that the majority of those voters were likely citizens and hence eligible to vote. While the majority of the voters on the list are likely citizens who are eligible to vote, Texans have no way of knowing whether or not any of the voters on the list are non-citizens who are ineligible to vote without additional information, his office said. Two Phoenix police officers whose violent arrest of a deaf black man with cerebral palsy was widely condemned by human rights advocates were placed on administrative leave as a formal probe proceeded into the incident, the police said on Tuesday. Tyrone McAlpine, 34 years old, was tassered and punched by two Phoenix officers named Benjamin Harris and Kyle Sue. Body camera footage of his arrest in August showed. McAlpine was charged with aggravated assault and resisting arrest, charges that were dropped late last week. The officers remain on administrative leave, a police spokesperson said in an email on Tuesday. The officers were on duty as of last week. Video of the August incident was aired by multiple media outlets last week after its release. NBC News reported that police body camera video and surveillance footage from the arrest was shared by one of McAlpine's attorneys. It also said there was no indication that the officers knew McAlpine was deaf or had cerebral palsy before his arrest. News agencies said police were called to a convenience store where a man claimed he was assaulted when he tried to stop a theft while pointing to McAlpine as the culprit. News agency also said McAlpine did not face charges related to those claims. McAlpine's lawyer said there had been no wrongdoing on McAlpine's part. McAlpine spent 24 days in jail before making bond, according to report. Civil rights organization Arizona and AACP had called for the officers to be placed on administrative leave until the full probe was conducted. Haitian gangs are ramping up attacks on areas they do not yet control. The head of the United Nations Integrated Office in Haiti, Binal, warned on Tuesday after days of renewed violence from an alliance of armed gangs in the Caribbean nation. The situation in Haiti has regrettably worsened, Maria Isabel Salvador said in a briefing to the UN Security Council, which over a year ago ratified the deployment of an international security force to help police restore order. Just a fraction of over 3,000 troops pledged by a handful of countries have so far arrived. Funding has also lagged, and an alliance of well-equipped armed gangs known as Vive and Sam has expanded across the capital and into surrounding regions. Salvador pointed to mounting attacks over the past week around the capital, its suburbs, farming region, and the city famed for the creation of the Haitian flag, where residents have been under an extended siege and pleading for more security reinforcements. The spread of violence from land and sea, she said, is spreading terror and fear, overwhelming the national security apparatus. The international mission, she added, remains critically under-resourced, which could impact deployment and impede it from carrying out its tasks in support of the national police. She also warned of rising tensions between the country's dual executive, headed by the Prime Minister and Presidential Council respectively, which are further eroding public trust in the government. More than 4,200 people have fled their homes in fresh attacks around the capital since last Thursday, according to UN estimates. Most of these taking refuge in makeshift camps in schools, churches, and health centers. At least 6 people have died after Hurricane Oscar hit Cuba over the weekend during a massive power outage, President Miguel Diaz-Canel said. The hurricane made landfall on Sunday and crossed the island nation's eastern coast as a tropical storm on Monday, bringing with it winds and heavy rainfall. The eastern province of Guantanamo has suffered severe damage due to the storm, the president said in a televised comment. On Friday, Cuba's largest power plants collapsed, crippling the entire grid and leaving the communist-run country's 10 million people in darkness. The blackouts triggered small protests and a warning from the government that any unrest would be punished. Cuba's power grid operator said that by Monday afternoon, it had restored electricity to most of the capital, Havana, which has over 2 million residents. However, many residents outside the capital remained without power, authorities said. Energy Minister Vincent de la O. Levy said that Hurricane Oscar had hit a region of strong electricity production, which would hamper its recovery. Several power plants were located in the area hit by the storm. Many people were left using improvised wood stoves in the street to cook their food before it went bad, while others lined up to buy subsidized food, according to reports. The Cuban government says the 62-year-old U.S.-imposed trade embargo is the cause of its economic and infrastructure problems, while Washington blames long-term mismanagement of its economic policy and resources, according to Press Secretary Catherine Jean-Pierre. Shootouts near the capital of Mexico's Sinaloa state killed 19 suspected gang members, while one local cartel leader was arrested, Mexico's defense ministry said on Tuesday, as intra-cartel violence intensifies. The deadly altercation on Monday took place about 11 kilometers outside the Sinaloa capital of Culiacan, when a group of more than 30 gunmen fired on soldiers, according to a statement from the ministry. It added that some of the suspected cartel gunmen fled the scene after federal agents returned fire. The detainee was identified as Edwin Antonio N., his latest name withheld as it's typical for those accused of crimes in Mexico, and described as a local leader of the Sinaloa cartel faction, led by its legendary co-founder, Ismael El Mayo Zambada. A document dated October 22 from Mexico's National Registry of Detained Persons, obtained by newsmen, listed an Edwin Antonio Rubio Lopez, apprehended by military personnel in Sinaloa. 7 vehicles, nearly 30 firearms, including machine guns, ammunition, and military-style vests and helmets, were also seized. The gangland violence plaguing Sinaloa is seen by security analysts as likely pitting the two factions against each other, and has intensified since early September, with around 200 dead and more than 300 others believed to be missing, according to official data. World Bank is prepared to provide Argentina with more than $2 billion in new loans destined for social security, education, transport, energy, and battling poverty, the multilateral lender's regional vice president said on Tuesday. Carlos Felipe Jaramillo, who heads the World Bank's Latin American and Caribbean division, made the announcement on X as the country's economy minister attends the International Monetary Fund World Bank Summit in Washington. The government of Libertarian President Javier Milei is battling with one of the world's highest inflation rates, with a tough austerity drive that has slowed economic activity and pushed up poverty well past 50%. Milei has vowed to veto any law that threatens the fiscal balance, including recent legislation that looked to shore up university funding in line with inflation, fueling mass protests. Economy Minister Luis Caputo traveled to Washington for the summit with Central Bank Chief Santiago Bosili and Finance Secretary Pablo Queno, alongside other officials. He has said the South American nation is going to start negotiating a new program with the IMF after overachieving several targets in its current plan. The current $44 billion agreement ends later this year. Philippine President's office called on Wednesday for an investigation to leave no stone unturned in bringing to justice the killers of a broadcast journalist in the southern province. Despite a media environment that ranks as one of the most liberal in Asia, the Philippines remains one of the world's most dangerous places for journalists, particularly in its provinces. Maria Vilma Rodriguez, 56 years old, was shot 3 times by a lone suspect on Tuesday in a store near her home in Zamboanga City. The police said in an incident condemned by the office of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and a journalist group. These kinds of vile and atrocious acts have no place in our nation, which values freedom, democracy, and the rule of law above all, the Presidential Communications Office said in a statement, describing the attack as barbaric. Police arrested a suspect on Wednesday, said Zamboguan City police official Kimberly Molitas, but declined to identify the individual. Police were looking at a family feud as a potential motive, she added. The killing of Rodriguez, the mother of 4 children, who was also a community official, takes to 5 the number of journalists killed since Marcos took office in June 2022. It takes to 200 the wider tally of journalists killed in the country since democracy was restored in 1986. Data from the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines showed, including 32 in a single incident in 2009. In terms of its efforts to prosecute the killers of journalists, the Philippines was ranked the 8th worst in the world by the New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists in 2023. Well, you're watching the international news at Atlantic Television Network. Still ahead, Priyanka becomes latest Gandhi to contest election. We'll be back after this break. To stay with us.
The people of Maiduguri need your help. A catastrophic flood has engulfed the city, leaving over 1 million residents stranded and fighting for survival. Entire communities are submerged, with people trapped inside homes and on rooftops cut off from food, clean drinking water and essential supplies. Health experts are warning of a potential outbreak of deadly diseases, and medical facilities are out of commission. The situation is dire. Helicopters, boats and high-riding trucks capable of navigating the treacherous, waterlogged areas are urgently required to reach the countless men, women and children still awaiting rescue. The Nigerian media is issuing a desperate plea to the government, humanitarian organizations, international actors and citizens across the nation. Step in now, before it's too late. For more information on how you can help, contact Professor Usman A. Tar, the Honorable Commissioner for Information and Internal Security, Borno State, on 0809-233-3955. Every second counts.
This is powered by Atlantic Television Network.
Thanks for staying with us. You're watching the broadcast of the international news on the Atlantic Television Network. We are open for adverts, placements, bookings and commercials. And you can connect with us and watch us on ATN socials, Facebook and YouTube at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram and TikTok at Atlantic TV Network 1, X formerly Twitter at Atlantic TV Net. Watch us live on our website, atlanticnetwork.tv. And now to the rest of our stories. High Court in Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, granted bail to the wife of former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan in a case pertaining to the illegal sale of state gifts. Local broadcaster Joe TV reported on Wednesday. Both Khan and his wife, Bushra Bibi, are currently in jail on multiple charges, including illegally selling gifts worth more than 140 million rupees received during his 2018-2022 premiership from a state treasury locally known as the Toshkhana. It was not immediately clear if Bibi would be free from prison or kept in jail on other charges she faces. Authorities cancelled trains, warned fishermen not to venture out to sea, and prepared to evacuate people in vulnerable locations on Wednesday, a day before a severe cyclonic storm was set to barrel into the eastern coast of India and Bangladesh. Cyclone Dana, currently over the Bay of Bengal, is expected to strengthen into a severe cyclonic storm with wind speeds gusting up to 120 kilometers per hour and is likely to make a landfall late on Thursday, hitting the eastern coast of India and the southern coast of Bangladesh, India's weather office reported. More than 200 trains were cancelled, and in India's Odisha, a state prone to cyclones, and officials said preparations were being made to evacuate people who live in vulnerable areas. We're making announcements and we will begin evacuations after lunch hours. Dilip Routrai, an administrative officer in one of the districts likely to be affected, told newsmen. Heavy to extremely rainfalls is expected in Odisha over the next 3 days, the weather office warned, adding that the storm could damage homes, roads, crops and power lines, leading to flooding and landslides. Schools in the state are closed until Friday, and fishermen have been advised not to venture out to sea. In neighboring Bangladesh, the weather department issued a warning to fishermen and exports along its southern coastline to stay. Bengal state, which shares a border with Bangladesh, has posted disaster relief teams equipped with tree cutting machinery and restoration equipment, officials said. Malaysia charged 22 people linked to an Islamic conglomerate, including its chief executive, on Wednesday for organized crime, according to documents and the company's lawyer. Authorities last month launched a wide-ranging probe into Global Equine Services and Businesses (GISB) holdings for various crimes, including suspected money laundering, human trafficking and sexual offenses against children, after police rescued hundreds of youngsters from suspected abuse at care homes run by the firm. GISB, which police say is linked to a banned religious sect, has denied allegations of widespread abuse and other misconduct, although its chief executive, Nasiruddin Mod Ali, acknowledged that 1 or 2 cases of sodomy had occurred at its shelters. On Wednesday, Nasiruddin and other members of GISB were charged with organized crime, an offense that carries jail terms between 5 and 20 years if convicted. Charge sheets reviewed by newsmen showed. The documents did not provide details on the alleged charge. There will be a representation, an appeal, and a challenge of the charges, GISB lawyer Rosli Kamaruddin told reporters after a court hearing where the charge sheets were issued. Those charged on Wednesday included Mohammed Adib, the son of late Malaysian preacher Ashari Muhammad, the founder of the Al-Argam religious sect that was outlawed by the government in 1994 for allegedly spreading deviant Islamic teachings in the Muslim-majority country. GISB has acknowledged its link to Al-Agam, but now describes itself as an Islamic conglomerate based on Muslim practices. However, Malaysia's Home Affairs Minister said last week investigations found many GISB followers still adhered to Al-Agam teachings, while religious authorities in several states have issued fatwas declaring the group deviant. India will retain curbs on investments from nations with which it shares a land border, the finance minister said days after the pact with China on patrolling their disputed Himalayan frontier. The deal paves the way to end a 4-year military standoff and improve political. Asian giants strained since a deadly border clash in 2020 that slowed exchanges of capital, technology and talent. I cannot blindly receive foreign direct investments, FDI, because I want money for investment, forgetful or unmindful of where it is coming from. Nirmala Sitharaman told a gathering at the Wharton Business Schools in the United States on Tuesday. The dispute led to stagnation in ties between the world's two most populous countries at a time of exploding demands for electric vehicles, semiconductors, and artificial intelligence, key growth areas offering opportunities for cooperation. In 2020, India stepped up vetting and security clearances in its scrutiny for investments from companies based in neighboring countries, but did not specifically mention any names, widely seen as aimed at staving off takeovers and investments by Chinese firms, effectively turned away billions of dollars from the likes of car makers, BYD, and red tape and ensnarled Indian firms. However, Indian imports of goods from China have surged 56% since the 2020 border clash, nearly doubling New Delhi's trade deficit with Beijing to $85 billion. China remains India's biggest source of goods and was its largest supplier of industrial products last year. Priyanka Gandhi Vedra, a scion of India's Nehru Gandhi dynasty, submitted a nomination on Wednesday to contest an election to parliament, the latest candidate from a family that has dominated politics and given the country 3 prime ministers. Vadra, 52 years old, filed her papers for the Wayanad seat in the southern state of Kerala for the November 13th vote after a roadshow attended by thousands of party. Wayanad was won by Vadra's brother, Rahul Gandhi, in the national election this year, but he had to vacate it as he also won from a second seat in the family bastion in Indian law allows candidates to retain only. Rahul, 54 years old, is the leader of opposition in the House of Parliament, while the mother, Sonia, is a member of the upper house. Both accompanied Vadra to Wayanad. He stood with my brother when the whole world was turning its back against him, Vadra told supporters before filing her papers. It's my honor to represent you if you give me a chance. Votes pulled in by that will be counted on November 23. Vadra, who is known for her public speaking skills, formally entered politics in 2019 when she became a general secretary in Congress. She had, however, not contested elections so far and limited herself to campaigning for her family and the party. Modi and BJP accused Congress of practicing dynastic politics for its dependence on the Gandhi. Congress has ruled in India for 54 of its years since independence from Britain, and Vadra's father, grandmother, and great-grandfather were prime ministers for more than 34 years. Fighting Myanmar's ruling military said it has taken control of a mining hub that is a major supplier of rare earth oxides to China, likely disrupting shipments of elements used in clean energy and other technologies. Rare earth mining in Myanmar is concentrated in Kachin State around the towns of Panwa and Chipway, adjacent to southwestern China's Yunnan province. The Kachin Independence Army, Kaya, took control of Panwa on October 19, spokesperson Colonel Naubu told reporters on Tuesday. It had previously captured Chipway, according to local Myanmar media. Newsman was not able to independently verify the status of both towns. The Kaya is focused on managing the town of Panwa and has no current plans for economic issues, Nabu said. He did not respond when asked whether the Kaya is open to working with China or rare earths. Previously, rare earth mining areas in Kachin State were under the control of Myanmar's government and welcome payments from Chinese companies looking to establish mines. Last year, Myanmar supplied China with about 50,000 metric tons of rare earth oxides, RIOs, from iron absorption clays, eclipsing China's domestic IEC mining quota of 19,000 tons and making it the world's top exporter of heavy REOs, according to broker Odd Minute. South Korea's spy chief has told lawmakers that North Korea has sent additional 1,500 troops to Russia to support its war against Ukraine. Last week, the National Intelligence Service said it had confirmed that North Korea sent 1,500 special operation forces to Russia this month. And told a closed-door parliamentary committee meeting on Wednesday that his agency has found North Korea sent additional 1,500 soldiers to Russia, according to lawmakers Park Sung-won and Lee Seung-kwin, who attended the meeting. Park cited Cho as saying that North Korea plans to send a total of 10,000 troops to Russia by December. Opposition party overtook Prime Minister Viktor Orban's Fidesz party among decided voters in a poll on Wednesday for the first time since 2010. Hours ahead of a key speech by the veteran nationalist who has strong ties with Russia. Orban will speak later on Wednesday on the anniversary of Hungary's 1956 anti-Soviet uprising, which was brutally crushed by the Red Army. A top aide triggered outrage last month by suggesting that Hungary would have fared better by not resisting the 1956 Soviet invasion, in comments that were also critical of Ukraine's efforts today to push back Russian forces. Orban, a nationalist who shot to fame in 1989 by demanding the withdrawal of Soviet troops from Hungary, said his aide's ambiguous words had been an error, while the leader of Hungary's opposition condemned them as traitorous. Media-savvy political newcomer Peter Mega, 43 years old, a former government insider, has attracted big crowds to rallies of his new teaser party in the past months, at which he accused the government of corruption and running a propaganda machine. The government denies the allegations, but Mega has tapped into voters' frustration with Orban, who has grappled with several challenges over the past months with the inflation-hit economy struggling. The poll by 21 Research Center, a Budapest-based think tank, and published by local media Partisan, showed TISA had 42% support among decided voters in a survey in the first half of October, with Fidesz behind at 40%. When looking at the entire population, Fidesz still leads with 29% support, with TISA's at 26% in the poll. Two other recent polls showed Fidesz with a shrinking lead over TISA. Polio vaccination campaign in North Gaza has been postponed due to Israeli bombardments, mass displacements, and lack of access, the World Health Organization said on Wednesday. This final phase, due to begin on Wednesday, aimed to vaccinate more than 119,000 children in the Palestinian enclave under siege for over a year in response to militant group Hamas attacks in Israel. The current conditions, including ongoing attacks on civilian infrastructure, continue to jeopardize people's safety and movement in northern Gaza, making it impossible for families to safely bring their children for vaccination and health workers to operate. The UN agency said in a statement, reiterating its call for a ceasefire. The polio campaign began on September 1st after the World Health Organization confirmed in August that a baby was partially paralyzed by the type 2 polio virus, the first such case in the territory in 25 years. Delays in a second dose for children could jeopardize efforts to hold transmission. This could also lead to further spread to poliovirus in the Gaza Strip and neighboring countries, with the risk of more children being paralyzed. The agency said on Tuesday the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency called for a temporary truce to allow departures from areas of North Gaza, where it said people are just waiting to die after 3 weeks of Israeli attacks. 2 people have died after a boat carrying migrants capsized off the coast of Calais in northern France, said the local French authority on Wednesday. Israeli forces have killed 16 people in Gaza as they intensify their operation in northern areas of the Palestinian enclave, besieged hospitals and refugee shelters, and ordered residents to head south. The Gaza Health Ministry and the World Health Organization have said that they will be unable to start a polio vaccination campaign in northern Gaza as planned due to intense bombardments, mass displacement, and lack of access. The operation began 3 weeks ago with the declared aim of preventing Hamas fighters from regrouping, but intensified after the killing of Hamas chief Yahya al-Sinwar last Wednesday. The Health Ministry and the World Health Organization have said they will be unable to start a polio vaccination campaign in northern Gaza as planned due to the intense bombardments, mass displacements, and lack of access in northern Gaza. The Health Ministry has called on the world to send shrouds for the falling and postpone the campaign to vaccinate 120,000 children in Gaza City and northern Gaza today. The UN Palestinian Refugee Agency called for a temporary truce to allow people to leave areas of northern Gaza as health officials said they were running out of supplies to treat the injured. Israel has delivered aid in scores of trucks and airdrops, but Gaza medics say the aid has not reached them. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken urged Israel on Wednesday to use the opportunity to end the war in Gaza created by the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar and the destruction of much of the group's capacity during more than a year of conflict. Blinken said Israel had achieved many of its goals, including largely destroying Hamas as a military force and eliminating most of its leadership, including Sinwar, and should be looking to bring home the remaining Gaza hostages and end the fighting. Now is the time to turn those successes into an enduring strategic success, he told reporters as he prepared to leave for Riyadh on the next stage of his visit to the Middle East. The focus needs to be on getting the hostages home, ending this war, and having a clear plan for what follows, he said. Israel's campaign triggered by the October 7, 2023 attack by Hamas that killed some 1,200 people and saw 251 taken as hostages, has killed more than 42,000 Palestinians in Gaza, devastated the enclave and forced most of its population out of their homes into temporary shelters. It will require major international effort to rebuild. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government has not formulated any clear vision for Gaza following the war, beyond stating that Palestinian militant group Hamas military and governing capacity needed to be dismantled completely. Israel's Air Force shot down 2 rockets from Lebanon that set off air raid sirens in Tel Aviv on Wednesday. The military said as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was on a visit to the city, some senior U.S. State Department officials and traveling press at Blinken's hotel left the breakfast hall and rushed to the shelter downstairs, along with other hotel guests and staff when the sirens went off. The downing of the rockets came shortly after Israeli forces intercepted 2 drones launched from the east, targeting the Red Sea port city of Eilat, the military said. There were no immediate reports of injuries in either the drone or rocket attacks. The Islamic Resistance in Iraq group said it attacked Eilat with drones twice on Wednesday. The pro-Iranian militant group said it struck vital targets. Russian forces are storming 4 towns in eastern Ukraine as Moscow forces push to gain control over the whole of the Donbas region, according to pro-Russian bloggers. Russian forces are fighting with Ukrainian troops in the eastern Ukrainian towns of Selidov, Hernik, Kurakov, and Terex, according to posts by bloggers on Tuesday. Yuri Podolyaka, a prominent Ukrainian-born pro-Russian military blogger, said that Russian forces were attacking Hernik from several directions and fighting in the center of the town, which had a pre-war population of over 10,000 people. Podolyaka said that fighting was also going on in the outskirts of Kurakov and Selidov, which each had populations of about 20,000 before the war. Russian forces, which President Vladimir Putin ordered into Ukraine in February 2022, advanced in September at the fastest rate since March 2022, according to open-source data. Despite Ukraine taking a part of Russia's Kursk region, Ukraine's general staff said that Russian forces had tried to attack at multiple places along the front, but that Ukraine had repelled their attacks. At least 18 people were killed, including 4 children, and 16 were wounded in an Israeli strike on Monday near Beirut's main government hospital, the health ministry said on Tuesday. Israeli jets hit Hezbollah targets close to the Rafik Hariri University Hospital in Beirut, but did not target the hospital, and it was not affected by the strike, the Israeli military said on Tuesday. However, the director of the hospital said that due to the Israeli attack, nearby debris, probably from heavy ammunition, had caused damage to the medical facility. While there were no casualties among the staff, efforts to rescue people in front of the hospital were ongoing, the director, Jihad Sadar, said. 2 patients in Norway has been diagnosed with the Mpox virus of the Clade 2 variety, the Oslo municipality said on Tuesday. Clade 2 is a less severe form of Mpox than the Clade 1b strain that has recently caused global concerns. Authorities are currently investigating whether there is a connection between the 2 cases, the municipality said in a statement. And that's it on the international news for today. Before we go, let's take a look at the major stories. We told you that Sudan RSF attacks East Gazira villages. We also told you that 10 bodies recovered in fuel tanker explosion. You also heard that UK's Labour Party accused of election interference. We went ahead to tell you that Capitol riots defendants face trespassing charges. Government condemns killing of broadcast journalists. You also heard that India retains investment costs on border nations. Israeli strike kills 4 children in Beirut. And that's the package for today. I am Victor Peter. Many thanks for watching. Remember, you can follow us on our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, at Atlantic TV Net, Facebook and YouTube, at Atlantic Television Network, Instagram, at Atlantic TV Network. Watch us live on our website, atlanticnetwork.tv. Peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Business News comes up next.